Hello everyone and welcome back. It's Matt here, also known as Plandana, with another deck profile video for you. Today we are looking at my personal favourite deck, one that surprised me a lot when I started playing with it, and that is King. Now, King is not a leader often played because there are very good purple leaders in the game, and he is not one of them. However, I found that you can do a lot of fun things with King, and it is an enjoyable strategy. So what he does is, on your turn, if you have 10 or more Don cards in play, all of your opponent's characters get minus 1000 power. The design space on King is really interesting because it feels like a mirror of the red Zorro, but not quite as good because it doesn't affect your opponent's leader. But still, there's some really cool stuff you can do with attacking over your opponent in the later game if you can get yourself there. So let's have a look at the deck. For the most part, it's a fairly standard purple control deck, but there are a few unique things King can do. And one of the best cards to combo with him, in my opinion, is Page 1. Now, Page 1 lets you Dom -1 to be able to attack active characters, which goes really well with King's ability. You might think at first that it's a bit of a nombo because you have to -1 Dom, meaning you're no longer at 10, but purple has plenty of ways to get that Dom card back. The best being Onigashima. If you can get that into play, you can keep using Page 1 every turn. He's a really good tempo piece as you keep attacking over your opponent's characters, and it doesn't feel bad to keep going back a Don. He also lets you get value out of another card that is commonly played in a lot of purple decks, which is Ulti. These two cards are designed to go together. Ulti is usually run in purple just for the fact that she's a plus 2000 counter that also has 5000 power. But when she comes into play, you can Dom -1 to play a Page 1 for free from your hand. And let me tell you, every single time you pay 4 Don to get two 5000 power characters into play, it feels amazing and terrifies your opponent. So another card that most people won't usually see, and in fact I usually get asked what the card is every time I play it, is Sheep's Horn. This is from set 1. It is a 2-cost main phase event, and for Don -1 you can rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. Like Page 1, this exposes your opponent's characters to attacks. You can simply recover the lost Don with an Onigashima or a Jack, and then be able to attack over their stuff. It's quite useful for getting rid of some of their bigger characters. And of course we have the card I have mentioned a couple of times now in the form of Onigashima. I was running 4 full copies of this because it's so important to the strategy, but I really wanted to make some room for some other cards. I cut down to 3 and still feel like I see it a reasonable enough amount of the time. Onigashima is probably the best stage card in the game. It's really good advantage getting an extra rested Don out every turn, can pull you ahead, and just offsets all those -1 costs. That's kind of the core strategy of this game, is we're going to get to 10 Don and then use Page 1s or Sheep's Horns to keep being able to attack down our opponent's stuff. However, there are other ways to get our opponent's cards into range for attacking them, and that's by blocking their attacks. One of the best ways we have to do this is the combination of Kurozumi Semimaru and Kurozumi Higurashi. These two cards make a very, very powerful combo. Semimaru means that your Kurozumi clan characters cannot be KO'd in battle, while Higurashi is a blocker. This allows you to keep blocking every single turn without losing your blocker, unless your opponent wants to invest some events into either getting rid of Higurashi or Semimaru. By being able to set this block up, we force our opponent to attack more frequently. This puts their characters in the rested position and exposes them to attacks from our characters or leaders, especially potent when we're at 10 Don and have reduced everything's power. Now, we have quite a few utility cards in this deck, and one of the best things I think you can do in purple is have the hand control package of Jack and X-Drake. Now, in order to get the Page 1s in that are key parts of our strategies, we decided not to run the full playsets of these cards, only 2 Jacks and 2 X-Drakes. X-Drake is awesome because he's plus 2000 power, he comes straight into play and forces your opponent to trash a card from their hand. Jack can do it repeatedly, but often your opponent is going to target him down and get him out of there. But at the very least, he's a good way to soak up your opponent's removal. Using these cards, you're able to keep them off having too many counters to defend themselves with, and potentially forcing them to make the choice between holding on to a threat or holding on to something defensive. You can really get some good advantage by using these cards. Another card that can provide decent advantage for this is the 2-for-1 of Who's Who. We're only running 2 copies of Who's Who because he doesn't have a counter ability, and a lot of the threats in this game cost 4 or more, but he's still a very good card to get down early on to swing some tempo, or later in the game to pop off a cheap blocker your opponent is relying on to protect themselves. The fact that he plays from your life as a trigger is absolutely huge as well. Even if you don't use his ability, it's 3,000 power for free. But usually he's going to come in and pick off one of their key pieces, such as Nami's, Momonosuke's, any of those annoying one-cost cards that get your opponent value. And of course we are running a staple in purple, a full 4 copies of Jack. This is very self-explanatory why it's in the deck. It ramps our Don up. It gets us to 10 quicker with King. I don't think any purple decks are going to not run Jack. We do have some more good tempo and removal cards, namely the various types of King, 2 at 6 cost and 1 at 7. Both of these are good ways to pick off our opponent's board while putting a bit of power into play. They're not the greatest removal, but being able to have a huge body afterwards is absolutely amazing. We're not relying on these cards, but they're good to draw in certain situations. We also have removal in the form of events. We have 2 Brachio Bombers, which is probably purple's best straight up removal event, able to pop a 6k or less, 6 cost or less, and add a Don card from your Don deck and say as active. But I'm also trying out running 1 copy of Elephant's Marchu. This does a similar thing to Brachio Bomber, but can only hit cost 2 or less characters. I'm only running a single copy because there aren't that many cards at 2 or less, but there are definitely situations where you'll want to run a way to kill off one of your opponent's cheap characters. And it gets to use its main effect from life rather than Brachio Bomber, which just gets you extra Don, so that could be quite useful for suddenly swinging the game in your favour. We are also running a full 4 copies of Queen the Blocker. Queen is pretty much the only way to get card advantage in purple, allowing you to draw 2 and trash 1 for Don -1, while also then being a 6k blocker, which is very, very good at defending yourself while using minimal counters. This is basically just a simple defensive card that helps us find the useful pieces. And we also are, of course, running the staple 10 cost Kaido. This card is just huge and will flip games on its head. For Don -6, you can kill every character other than Kaido because King is an Animal Kingdom Pirates type leader, so all these effects still work. I really love this Kaido. I've found a lot of purple mirrors come down to being able to predict when your opponent's going to play one and playing your own one in response to kill it off. It's a great card. There's very, very few ways to do with it, and it will just flip the game in your favour. We have a few cards then just to finish the game, because I found the problem with King was we didn't have much finishing power. We could put out these powerful threats, but we're generally playing a little bit slower, and our opponent could just generate a little bit of tempo at the end of the game. So I wanted to include some cards with rush in the form of Queen and 1 copy of the 9 cost Kaido. I avoided running additional copies of the 9 cost Kaido because we already have 2 of the 10 cost ones, and because we want to stay at 10 Don, I don't want to be minusing all of our Don too frequently. Queen, however, only minuses 1 Don, gains rush, and synergizes well with King by giving a further -2000 to our opponent's characters, letting us finish off some of them with some quick attacks. And the last few cards we have in the deck are mostly just filler, here to defend ourselves. 3 copies of Blast Breath, 2 copies of Sasaki. They have their uses. Blast Breath is a very powerful event that's going to keep us alive. Sasaki we're pretty much only ever going to keep in our hand to use as a counter. But that is my list for running King. It's a very interesting deck. It plays similarly to most purple control, but you get to do some cool different things, and you're not as reliant on losing all of your Don, which can be quite useful in the late game. If you've kept a few cards in your hand, you can hold back, let your opponent fire off their main removal, and then start dropping threats later on. I definitely recommend giving it a go. And yeah, let us know in the comments what you think. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps beat that nasty YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much for watching.